Welcome to Just Minding My Business Media. We're happy that you're here today. Remember to broaden the scope of exposure for your business by going beyond the interview. Learn more at www.jmmdmediallc.com, or you can email us at jmmdradio@gmail.com. So today, the quote of the day: champions keep playing until they get it right. Billie Jean King. We are so excited to be bringing Sonja Keeves, who is the CEO of Sisters with a Voice podcast network, where she helps women entrepreneurs get unstuck from thinking about a podcast to building, launching, and monetizing a podcast in 30 days. Wow. As the executive director and the host of 2 podcast shows, wow, I lost my train of thought after that 30 days. Wow, again, so she has 2 podcast shows, and one is Begin Again, and the other one is Inspiring Nations. And she's an international podcast show heard in over 164 countries, where she interviews women from across the globe that tell their stories of how they might inspire others every day. So welcome, Sonja. So happy to have you here.
Hello, Miss Ida. I am so honored to be here on your show today.
Absolutely. So tell us about Sisters with a Voice podcast network.
Yes, so that is my company. I'm the founder and CEO. And the company came about after launching my own podcast show, Inspiring Nations, back in 2018. And with the success of that show, I realized I wanted to do more to help impact women primarily, because this platform of having a podcast show is so underutilized, because I think many people still don't know exactly how to leverage a podcast regardless of the industry that they serve. And so I decided to take all that I learned in launching my own podcast show and create my company, Sisters with a Voice podcast network, because regardless of the color of your skin, we are all sisters in this space of podcasting. And so I wanted to take what I learned and help transform other women's lives by teaching and training them how to start their own podcast shows. And as you read, yes, in 30 days.
Yes, that's amazing. So when people come to you, what are some of the mindsets that they have around a podcast?
Well, the first thing they kind of think about instantly is, I don't know if I have enough content for an actual show. And many times when I have conversations with them, they have more content than they think. They just don't know how to kind of take that content and turn it into a podcast episode. And so the simplest way that I explain that process is everything that you've ever written, whether it's in books, whether you have spoken on stages, whether you have written blogs, all of that work that has been written down can be easily transcribed into an audio style type podcast show or video style type podcast. So it's really taking written work in audio format. And so usually when I explain it that way, they're more open to wanting to learn more. So that usually becomes the first challenge, is understanding if I have enough content. The second challenge that I found is that some believe, I don't know if I can stay committed and consistent in this space, because many are super excited about the idea of starting a podcast, but they're concerned that, will this be something that I can commit to? And then thirdly, they're concerned about how much time is it going to take? And so those are like kind of the 3 top challenges people have. It's really understanding if they have enough content, could they be committed to this process? And then could they, do this for the long haul?
Yes, because the commitment piece, I believe, is one of the most important things.
Yes.
Because being a podcast host myself,
Yeah.
You've got to have a show every week or whatever you say you're going to do.
Yes. Yes.
That's what you need to stick to and do,
Yes.
because that's how you build your audience.
Absolutely.
And it's also how you get on the bigger platforms like Spotify and iHeart. They want to see consistency.
Yes, they do.
So when you are working with women on that consistency piece, what does that look like?
Well, the consistency, the way that you start with the consistency, you have to kind of work backwards, and you have to start with your mindset, because your mindset has to be in the right place to even have the consistency. So I always start from the place of, why do you want to start a podcast? Because at the end of the day, you're the person that has to show up consistently for the show. You can't want to start the show because your girlfriends told you to start it or God told you to start it. You've got to be able to have in your mind, why is it that you want to start one? And for me, the reason why I started Inspiring Nations was because I had just gotten laid off from corporate America. And I was in a space for so many years where, one, I was most of the time the only token Black person in the room, and trying to articulate my intelligence and people to see beyond my resume or to see beyond just the things I was speaking, of showing up and seeing me. And so I would always get the conversation or the talk of, don't be so ambitious, or don't be so willing to, speak up all the time. Sometimes people just want, you to just work hard. And if you just work hard and keep your head down, the promotions will come. And when that didn't transpire in my life, I recognized in that moment when I got the layoff that I'd wasted so many years listening to what other people say that I should do, speak, say, that I was like, you know what? I'm tired of trying to fit into a society that was never designed for me to succeed. And I'm going to create my own table and welcome women who want to be a part of this table, that want to speak up, want to share their stories, want to have and find the power in their own voice. And that was what was really pivotal for me in creating that space for women. And when they came onto Inspiring Nations and interviewing and having those conversations, that's where I discovered all of these incredible women around the world that had similar stories, that had different stories, inspirational, transformational, courageous. And the first thing they said to me at the end of every interview was, Sonja, thank you for allowing me to come onto your space and share my story, because no one was giving me that opportunity. And so to see today more women entering into the space of podcasting, it makes me feel good, because I saw that there was an unfilled need out there. And the podcasting space is, it's a low barrier to entry, so anyone can get into the space. It then becomes, once you understand what your role will be in that space, then it's about being consistent. And so for me, I'm here because there's so many women that need to tell their stories. So I can't be inconsistent and not having a show, because for every show that doesn't happen, that's a story that doesn't get told. So for me, it's bigger than me. And so when you're creating your podcast show, you've got to understand you may be the face, but it's bigger than you. You're impacting lives around the world. So imagine your story being heard in Africa, in Asia, in Dubai. And there's another woman on the other side of that podcast show who's tuning in, and they're recognizing that if you could create a platform after a layoff, like Inspiring Nations, then I can inspire people in my community, and I can pick up the mantle and figure out what is that thing I can do. And so I show women, let's start with a podcast. And so many women that I work with has started a business by starting their podcast. And what it's done for them, it's branched them off to not only have a podcast, but they've gone on to write books. They've spoke on stages. They've built community. And to know that I had a piece in that makes me feel even the more honored, because it lets me know that the space that God created for me to do this, and I didn't ask anyone's permission. I said, you know what, this is something that I want to do. So I get to create the space. I get to have the conversations with the people that I want to. And I have built incredible friendships with so many women from around the world that I know, had it not been for my podcast show, none of what I experience in my company and in my life would be possible without it.
Oh, no, that's right. And that's a feeling that you just can't even describe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is really, and like you said, it's bigger than us.
Yeah.
We're just a vessel.
That's it. That's it.
But I know on my podcast, sometimes I don't even know what we're going to be talking about. And sometimes I'm so busy, I may not even get to look at the profile until maybe an hour before the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I just interviewed a gentleman who was an accountant, and I'm thinking that's what we're going to be talking about.
Uh-huh.
No, it was not. We talked about his book and how to, really manifest by recording and writing down activities of your day.
Ah.
Nice.
And
I was like, oh my God, I didn't even see that coming.
Yeah.
So the other thing, you get to learn from our guests. It's a learning opportunity.
Yes, it is.
For us and our audience, as well as our audience.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So with women coming on, the other thing I hear is getting the listenership.
Yes.
A lot of people starting a podcast say they're not getting the numbers.
Yeah.
So how do you work with your clients with that?
Well, I always start first, seeing what have they been doing. And believe it or not, a lot of it starts with the consistency. A lot of them are very inconsistent. And what consistency looks like is if you have a weekly show, still having a weekly show, even when a guest doesn't show up, having a weekly show, even if life happens, you get sick. It's being able to schedule ahead. It's always being in that listener's ear, even when you may not be physically there. So that's the first place why people don't get the numbers, because they don't get the consistency. The other piece, as simple as it sounds, and in fact, I just talked about this today, is telling people you have a podcast.
Absolutely.
I am blown by so many people who tell me, oh, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, I'm all of these things. And then the last thing's like, and I'm a podcaster. And I'm like, wait, what? What's the name of your podcast show? And then they'll tell me, and I'm like, well, how come I've never heard about it? And then they start going, well, I really haven't talked about it a lot. And I'm like, well, that's the reason why you're not getting the numbers. Your podcast is an extension of you. It cannot be this second thought of, oh, and I'm a podcaster. If it goes back to your why did you want to start your podcast? Most people start a podcast because they want more visibility, they want more credibility, and they want more profitability. Those are usually the three areas why people get into podcasting. And so the visibility piece can only come when you're telling people everywhere you go about a podcast.
Yes.
It's just like I tell people, like when we watch television and we watch television programming and we see the commercials. How many times a day do you see a McDonald's commercial come on?
Yeah.
I said, count, like if you go in a 24-hour period, count how many times you see a McDonald's commercial.
Yeah.
And the reason why it comes on so often, because by human nature, when we constantly see something over and over
Mhm.
again, it subconsciously makes us think, you know what? I need to go to McDonald's. Well, the next time I'm out, I'm going to need to stop by McDonald's.
Yeah.
The same thing has to be with your podcast show. Everybody should know that you have a podcast show. I mean, they should be like, they should be the ones saying, I already know you have a podcast show.
Absolutely.
I tell people all the time that I have a show. Now, full transparency, I have been in that space too of not talking about my show as much because I was so busy, wanting to bring, talk about the guest and, and really market the guests, that I never really spent the time to talk and tell people that I have a podcast show. Like I have my podcast network. I talk about my business. I talk about how I help people. But I have said, oh, and by the way, I guess I am the host of 2 podcast shows. And they're like, what? And it's because we don't think about it we don't position it the way we should. And so you want that listenership, and you need to position it in the level of importance as you going out to tell people you're the author and speaker. It should be the very first thing. I am a podcast host of, and the name of your show. And you can hear my show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever your podcast show lives. Tell people about it.
Yes.
As podcast hosts, unless you have a team or marketing team that's doing that for you, you have to be the marketing person. You have to be the CEO. you have to be all of these things. And I think that's sometimes what turns people off about wanting to get into podcasting, because it is a commitment to keep telling people about it. And so those numbers will come when you tell people you have a podcast. And then the third thing to help you with listenership is I tell people, like if I have guests on my show, will you share this podcast with your network?
Yes.
Will you leave a review? Ask these things. The Bible teaches us you have not because you ask not. If you're not getting the listenership, my question to you is, what have you asked people to do to help you to market your show? What have you done as the podcast host to market your show? And usually that's when I'm stepping on people's toes. And it's not to make them feel bad, but it's to get them to look at from that perspective that if your listenership is not where it needs to be, then look at the activities or the lack of activities that you're doing and see if you change some things around, how can that pivot? And then the last point that I definitely want to bring up is, are you tracking your metrics?
Yes.
Because many people have a show, they're just putting the shows out there. And yes, I'm on Apple Podcasts. Yes, I'm on Spotify. But are you tracking to see where your listenership is coming from? Because sometimes you'll find if the listenership is not there, perhaps it's the messaging. Maybe it's the topics you're talking about that's not targeting your ideal audience. Maybe it's, falling on deaf ears. It's in this, podcast space where you haven't really strategically identified who's the listener for your particular show. And so I did the same thing when I started in 2018. I was just creating this platform for women to just tell their stories. It really wasn't until the end of 2018, going into 2019, when I partnered with another company that took me to 164 countries, that I began to really look at, well, where are my listenership coming from? Yeah. Even down to looking at the episodes. Well, which ones had the highest ratings? Which ones weren't, that great? And even I can tell the ones where there was low participation, it might have been a particular topic that even I wasn't really that crazy about. Or maybe the guests really didn't have a lot of expertise, but they were just trying to put themselves out there, but they really weren't the expert in the field that they were speaking of. And so that authenticity did not really come through. And so it's all these little things that you need to do. So it's about tracking your metrics, showing up consistently, telling people that you have a podcast, and then being strategic about what are those goals that you want for your podcast? Because everybody's different. Do you want 10,000 downloads? Or do you want just to build a community? Do you want to just connect and make friends with people? I mean, every success is different for everybody. And I tell people, don't just start with the downloads. That's a metric, but it does not have to be the metric if that's not the metric for you. You want to identify the success strategies for your show. And if you're having some issues in certain areas like the listenership, then peel back and see what can I do differently? What have I been doing that's not working? And then what can I do now to change and pivot? And it really is as easy as just making a small shift that could really take your show from here to the stratosphere.
Absolutely. So if people want to work with you, how do they do so?
Absolutely. So first, thank you again so much for this opportunity to be on your show. And if you want to know how to work with me, you can visit my website at www.sonjakeeve.com. That's SONJAKEE, V as in Victor E.com. And you can schedule a free 15-minute strategy session where we can sit down and talk about your goals. What do you want for your podcast show? And then set a strategy that can help you build your own powerful platform in 30 days.
Yes. I mean, and it's work, but it's rewarding. It's rewarding work.
Yes, it is.
I absolutely love it. When I first started, I learned everything the hard way.
Same. Guilty.
Everything. I didn't have somebody holding my hand.
No, yeah.
Now I do have a mentor that helps me out with it, but in the beginning, I was looking for people to interview. I didn't have.
Yep, same.
I was like grabbing my mama, their mama.
Anybody who would be a guest, honey. Yes.
So it's a struggle in the beginning.
Yeah.
But now it's such a mainstream thing.
Yes, it is.
There's people like yourself out there that will hold your hand through the process.
Yes.
And you can like beat all of those pitfalls we had to go through.
Yes. I'm going to teach you everything of what not to do. Yeah. We don't. Yeah. I feel like we were the pioneers. Like we were trying to figure it all out. But now, there's so much in connecting with someone that can help you. And I can absolutely help you, get through all of those pitfalls, help, tell you to avoid those pitfalls so that you can do it with ease and no stress.
Absolutely. Because now, in 2023, people are my interviewees are starting to ask me for transcripts, so it's new things coming about that the interviewees are asking for. And one of the things, you got to listen to your interviewees.
Yes.
They're your customers.
Yes.
So if you don't have, if you start to hear these things enough, then you need to go into fix mode and provide that service.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely fun.
Yes,
I absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started it, I started my podcast for my organization, a Sister Circle Empowerment Network. But the women, they were busy in their businesses, so I couldn't get that consistency that I needed.
Yeah.
And I realized, that was the key.
Yes.
You have to be consistent.
Yes, you do.
You must be consistent. And if you feel like you're not going to be consistent, then hold off.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you will grow and you will learn as you keep doing it.
Yes.
Everything. I mean, we all start as the dullest knife in the drawer.
Yes.
But as we continue to do it, we get better.
Yep. And better. Yes, we do.
Yes. And we find different things that work. We get rid of stuff that don't work. Because I remember in the beginning, I was doing all this editing. And my mentor was like, girl, you don't need to be doing all that editing. If it ain't scratchy and it ain't a lot of background noise, then let it be. And because I was spending hours of editing
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that right there, I was hating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was more like, if there's like, if I got dead space, then I'll get rid of that.
Right.
Or if there's some kind of distorted noise or
Yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
then I'll get rid of that. And that's the end of the editing because we
Mm-hmm.
are human.
Yeah.
If we cough,
Yeah.
if we cry,
Mm-hmm.
if we sneeze, it's human.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. This has been amazing, Sonja. Oh, tell us about your event. Tell everybody about the event that I was honored to be a part of last year.
Yep. So last year, I hosted my very first in-person conference called Podcasters Rock for Women in Business. And we have taken this on the road. And so this year, we have opened it up to men and women this year. And it's called Podcasters Rock the Experience. And it will be held on October 27th and 28th in the beautiful city in Fredericksburg, Virginia, at the Holiday Inn Conference Center. We actually had to find a bigger venue this year. So praise God for that. And so tickets are on sale. And so you can go to my website at sonjakeeves.com to purchase your tickets. You'll see the flyer and you'll just click register and you can register to get your tickets. We have already locked in our speakers. So we've been announcing in this month, every day we try to talk, introduce a brand new speaker that's going to be on the platform. Ida was one of my speakers last year and did a phenomenal job. And it is a conference for those that are aspiring podcasters and those that already have podcasts, or people who, guess what, not sure if a podcast is for them, but they're curious and want to know, is this something to do in 2023? And the answer is yes. And come out to the conference. We're going to have amazing speakers that are going to really help you to take your podcast to the next level. Because the first year was about, really building it and, how to start it. Now it's really about taking it to the next level, because several of our speakers who weren't podcasters and guests have, since that conference in November last year, have launched their own podcast shows. I know Tyra Madam Money Jackson, she has premiered her podcast show, Dualpreneur Podcast. And so I've been checking that out. I'm so honored and that she has, and she was inspired by this conference. So it is a dynamic event. And you definitely want to come, because I tell people all the time, you don't want to miss out, because once tickets are sold out, baby, they are sold out. So we're going to have even a bigger presence this year, and we're really excited. We've got some really great things lined up for our guests and speakers alike. So definitely check out the event. It's also on Eventbrite. So look for Podcasters Rock, and you'll see all the information, hotel accommodations as well. So definitely reach out to me at sonjakeeves.com if you want more information. But I hope to see everyone at this year's conference.
Absolutely. And being at last year's, I had a blast, to say the least.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. So, ladies and gentlemen, you do not want to miss this. It was fun. It was inspiring. You walked away with things that you could use.
Mm-hmm.
It was just off the chain, Sonja. So congratulations for
your
first conference being such a success, and can't wait for this year for this one. So absolutely. So again, how do people get in contact with you?
Yep. So you can catch me on all social media platforms. I am on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I've even started a TikTok channel. So you can reach me there at Sonja Keeves. And of course, visit my website at www.sonjakeeves.com. I'd love to connect with you, love to work with you, but more importantly, would love to help you start and build your own podcast shows.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, Sonja, for taking time out of your busy day to share your wisdom on Just Minding My Business Media. And we are definitely going to have to do this again. And definitely love you. Mwah.
Love you too, Ms. Ida.
So thank you so